Sector is clear.
Give us everything we got! All wings.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Jedi Jazza here, and today we're going to go through my ultimate Starfighter assault guide to help all new and struggling players to be successful in Starfighter assault. So in this guide I'll be going through some very basics first, the three types of ships that we have available in Starfighter assault in Battlefront 2, and I'll go through some basic things like their abilities, their uses, and things like what star cards that I like to use. From there we'll then move on to some general gameplay tips, so I'll jump into some arcade and I'll just show you guys some basic tips and tricks that I like to use and apply when I'm piloting that will help you guys improve your Starfighter assault gameplay. And then to finish off, I'll be showing you a couple of clips that will hopefully give you an understanding of how I'm applying these tips to some online gameplay. And then to finish off, we'll just go over some basic strategic things. So as you all know from other game modes, you have an attacking side and a defending side. So what I'll be going through is the specific things that you can do when you're on one side or the other that will help your team ultimately to win the round. Before I begin this video, I want to give a quick shout out and a mention to my good friend Darth Maul 516. He has done a guide on using Boba Fett effectively, and that video that I watched has given me the inspiration to do this guide myself, and it's a very detailed and thorough guide that I really enjoyed. So I'll leave the link to that video and also to Darth Maul 516's channel in the description below, so feel free to go check that out, guys, because it's definitely worth a watch. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so we'll start with the real basics right now. So we've got three classes of ship that you can play as in Starfighter Assault in Battlefront 2. You have your fighter class, which is like a good all-around ship that can do a little bit of everything, and it's definitely the ship I recommend if you're a new or struggling player, as it's the easiest one to get a hold of and gives you the best grounding to be a good pilot. We also have the Interceptor, which I like to call the dogfighting ship. So most of the interceptors are very fast and agile, and they're very good at taking out opposing ships. So you need to use the speed of the interceptor ships to your advantage. And the last ship we have is the bomber. So the bomber is the opposite of the interceptor. It's quite slow moving, but it's very bulky, has a lot of damage output and a lot of health. So the bomber is really good at taking out objectives, but can struggle at times when it comes to one-on-ones with other ships. So we'll just want to go through some basic abilities. So most of these ships are equipped with either an afterburner or a droid repair as their left ability. So this is L1 for those playing on PlayStation 4. So the afterburner just gives you a speed boost for a short time, and it can break missile locks, which is extremely useful, and it has both offensive and defensive capabilities. So the afterburner can be used to close distance quickly on your enemy, and it can also be used to escape if you're low on health. The other use of the afterburner is that you can cancel the ability at any time after activating it by simply pressing the button again by re-triggering. The other left ability that is most frequent is the droid repair. As it says, you're just repairing the ship and giving yourself a health boost if you are low on health, and you can get star cards that will increase the amount of health that you can actually regenerate, and I'll go through that in a little bit. Middle abilities that you typically find are things like a laser barrage or a heavy laser. This just gives you a massive high damage laser that you can fire for a short period of time, but can be difficult to control, so it's definitely worth practicing using those abilities in arcade. Another ability that you can get is called a turret gunner, and the turret works exactly the same as the officer turret does in normal other game modes by locking onto enemies. The only difference being that the turret itself is actually facing behind the ship, So it's useful for locking on to enemies or objectives that are away from you or chasing you. Another typical ability that you will find for the interceptor ship is the heat sink ability, and this just gives you unlimited cooldown on your primary weapon for a short time. So that's very good for heavy sustained fire, like on objectives or on a slow moving easy target. We also have for the bomber, well, it's actually for most ships, but you get what they usually call like a proton torpedo, like you can see there, or an energy torpedo, or proton torpedoes. So this requires you to press the button once, which is R1 on PlayStation 4. It'll then lock on to an enemy within your line of sight, and once it is locked on, you press the button a second time to re-trigger it, and it will fire at that target. So you need to be able to lock on to an enemy to be able to use the proton torpedo effectively. There is another tip for the proton torpedo that you can use, but I will cover that in a little bit. So now I just want to go through quickly a couple more abilities first. So for the bomber ships, some of them have this electronic countermeasures ability, and what that does is prevents enemies from locking onto you with their torpedoes for a short time, and it makes you a much harder target to hit, because as you know, when you see an enemy, they'll have a small circle around their ship, which is where you've got to aim your lasers to be able to hit that target and destroy them. So that ability, when it's active, the circle will disappear from the bomber ship for a short time, which makes it extremely useful if you're firing at an objective or wanting to get away from an enemy when you're low on health. So now what I'm going to do is go over some star cards to use for each class. So if we start with the fighter. So for the fighter, it's really up to you what you guys want to do, because you can play this as a defensive style ship, or you can use it as an offensive style ship. So some good defensive cards for you to use and think about is ones like this one, which gives you extra health regen on your droid repair, or a lesser recharge on your afterburner ability. Another good card to use for defensive is this one here, Tactical Jammer, which means it takes longer for enemies to actually lock onto you with torpedoes. And another good card to use is this one, Reinforced Hull, which just gives you extra health that you have for your, it's basically like a continuous health buff, which can be useful if you want to stay alive for a bit longer. Another good card that I pretty much always run on the fighter ships is Repair Systems, which when you take some damage, the time taken before you regen your health is reduced, much like it works the same way that the Survivalist card does on the other base infantry classes. Some good offensive style cards that I like to use, one of them is this, Tune Lasers, which increases the damage of your primary weapon. Another card I like to use is this one, Targeting Computer, which means it takes less time for you to lock on to enemies when using a proton torpedo. But it's really up to you guys with the fighter. I think it's the most diverse class and the one that you can have the most play around with. So feel free to test all of these cards and let me know if you have a particular card that works for you, and I'll be able to hopefully give it a try myself and see what I can get from it. Pretty much the only card I wouldn't really recommend are these two. This one increases the damage of your middle ability, and this one increases the damage of your torpedoes, but the torpedoes themselves are not that great, so I wouldn't recommend those. Now for the interceptor class, because this is a very fast, agile, offensive class, you don't really need a lot on the defensive side. So I pretty much only have 3 cards that I typically use. There's this one, which increases the fire rate of your primary weapon. There's this one, which is the same as what it is for the fighter class. And we've got the advanced capacitors as well, which means you can fire for longer without overheating. There are some other defensive cards that you can try. For example, Tactical Jammer. It's the same way as the fighter one does. Another good one is Engine Upgrade, which makes you even more fast and more agile. but I definitely just prefer to use these 3 cards so you can deal out as much damage as possible as fast as possible, because that's the whole goal of the interceptor ships. And lastly, the bomber. So this is the opposite of the interceptor, so you really want to be looking at some defensive style cards for this class. So the first one that I like to use is this one, defensive upgrade. So this increases the active time of your electronic countermeasures ability, or alternatively, if you have a bomber with a droid repair ability, which like this one does, then it'll increase the health that you get back from using your droid repair ability. Another card, obviously, reinforced hull. Just a little bit of extra health and a little bit of extra bulk is always handy for staying alive for a bit longer. And another card I like to use is this one. Sorry, I can't find it. No, it's this one, sorry. So we know that the bomber is a slow moving ship, so having slightly faster acceleration and deceleration rates always is handy at getting away from an enemy or closing ground on some of the more agile enemies like the interceptor and fighter ships. But you can also play the bomber as an offensive style ship, so you have the advanced capacitors, your tuned lasers cards as before. And you've also got this one, which increases the active time of your middle ability, which is an ion cannon for the light side ships. The ion cannon just fires an extra pulse along with your primary weapon, which if it hits an enemy will slow them down and prevent the use of their abilities. It also decreases the recharge time of the multi-missile lock on the dark side ships. So that's everything that I need to cover from the very basics. So now I want to jump into some arcade and give you some general gameplay tips while I'm hopefully showing you exactly what I mean in the background. Okay, so now that I've gone through the very basics, just to get you guys started, I'll now have a look at doing some generalized gameplay tips while you're piloting that to help you to improve your gameplay. So before we even start with those, you just want to go into your options real quick and to your controls. So your Starfighter response curve is basically like the sensitivity for your piloting. To be honest, you can chop and change this up and down as you please, but my recommendation is just to leave it as the default 50% setting. I find that to be works extremely well for me, so I don't think anyone else needs to adjust that up or down at any point. The other thing you want to do is make sure disable roll is turned off, so otherwise you can't rotate your ship clockwise or anti-clockwise, which can be problematic if you're trying to get away from an enemy or if you are close to an obstacle. The other thing you want to do is turn the advanced flight on. So I'll show you what I mean by advanced flight. So when the advanced flight is turned off, like I've got it at the moment, you'll notice as I rotate the ship, it auto corrects itself back to level. So I'll do that again. Notice how it's correcting the ship without me actually touching the button. So by turning this advanced flight setting on as yes, and you'll notice that as I turn the ship, nothing will change. And this is really, really good for the next tip that I'm going to show you guys, which is to get used to flying by accelerating, decelerating, turning sharp corners, going close to obstacles and things like that. So you really want to be practicing flying close to obstacles, which I'll show you here. You really want to be able to do this sort of flight close to an obstacle where you're not going to crash and die, which I just did then, but so you really want to be practicing flying close to obstacles, because that's really going to help you escape from enemies when you're low on health. Because a lot of the time, if an enemy is chasing you, and you're ducking and weaving around corners like this, A, it's harder for you to actually get hit by their lasers, and B, it might actually deter them from chasing you any further because you will be too busy escaping and they don't want to be going too close to obstacles themselves as they might crash. So getting some practice in just learning how to adjust your flight and getting close to obstacles and things like that is really, really important if you want to be successful as a pilot. Okay, so now what I'm going to show you guys is some tips for having one-on-one dogfights with opposing ships. So as you can see here, ships will have a small aiming circle. That's where you've got to aim to get those kills. So you've got to aim your lasers towards this aiming circle. If the ship in question does not have an aiming circle, then it's out of range and there's no point firing on it. If you're trailing behind a target, it's pretty easy to hit the aiming circle. For targets that are moving left to right, you'll probably want to lead your shot just a little bit. Now what I can see here with this ship in question, oh, I just died out of bounds. So what you guys noticed with the ship that I was chasing just then, there was some black smoke trailing behind the ship. So that is an indicator that the ship is weak and low on health, which makes them an easy target for you to take out. So that's a good tip to keep in mind, is if you're out on the battlefront and you're flying around and you notice that someone has that black smoke behind them, they're a weak target, which should make it easier for you to take out. So for aiming towards this aiming circle, what you want to do is practice firing, just pulse firing your trigger. So you don't want to just hold the button down continuously because you overheat your lasers very, very quickly. So while you're tracking a target, you want to pulse it a little bit. Okay, I'm getting some hit markers. Now I can hold down that sustained fire and that gives you your kill. If you have a target moving left to right like this, see this guy here is flying all around all over the place, making himself very hard to actually hit. So what you want to keep in mind is if you're tracking a single target, you don't want to spend too long actually trying to kill that target. Because if you're spending way too long on a single target, that's pulling you away from the objective, that's pulling you away from getting as many kills as fast as possible. So as you can see, that guy there was an easier target. As the other guy, I just let him go. But now I can see he's weak. So give him a few seconds just to track, and boom, you get the kill. So you don't want to be spending much longer than about 15 or 20 seconds tracking on a single target, because that is valuable time that you could be spending searching for weaker, more viable targets that are easier to take out. So I'm in the intercept ship right now, and sometimes you might be able to turn around just as a ship is spawning in. They might be coming right towards you. If you have a head-on collision, if you have a head-on enemy coming straight towards you, as an interceptor, I would definitely advise to pull out, disengage. What you want to be doing is pulling around the side, turning around and trying to fire on them from the side. Take advantage of the fact that the ship is fast and very, very agile. The difference with the fighter and bombers, especially fighters like this one that have your droid repair ability, you can actually get away with a head-on collision. So you're just firing straight at the target, and as you're firing, you can activate your droid repair, which makes it almost impossible for the enemy to actually take you out, and you're almost guaranteed to get the kill every single time. So that's a good tactic to keep in mind for both the fighter and bomber class ships. But for the interceptor, it's not recommended, as the interceptor is very fragile and can be taken out very, very easily, especially if you're going one-on-one with a fighter like this one or a bomber. So this one is a head-on, and as you can see, that interceptor I took out very, very easily. And you've got to adjust your aim so that you're going between just your regular aim and your zoomed in, which is your L2 on PlayStation 4. If you're on a slow moving target like a bomber, then sometimes it's actually better off zooming in just so you can make sure you're hitting all your shots on the target and taking them out quicker. So as soon as they come out of your field of view, you want to let go of the trigger. You don't want to be firing too much because that's just wasting your lasers and it will overheat too fast, and then you'll be tracking the target like this but you won't be able to fire on them. You need to have as much available as possible. Tracking is also possible if you haven't quite taken the ship out but you have actually overheated your weapons. So I'll see if I can show you a instance of that happening. So let's find this target, for example. So I'm tracking him but my lasers have overheated, but you can stick with him because it's a slow moving target, wait for your lasers to come back, and then boom, you take him out very easily. So now you're probably wondering what you do if someone's actually chasing you. Well, if you've got an enemy that's chasing you, you want to randomize your flight patterns. So accelerate, decelerate, move in all random directions, use the debris and other things to your advantage to make yourself a very hard target to hit. That way you can survive longer. So I'm being chased at the moment. So as you can see, I'm using the debris to my advantage to hide from the view of the ships so that they can't shoot at me. Therefore I'm able to stay safer and survive longer until it is my turn to turn around and take out the ships coming towards me. This is the lock on, so it's locked on, you press it again, and there you go, you get the kill. Now for this fighter, the other ability that I didn't actually mention earlier is the quad laser cannon, which just gives you extra damage on your primary weapon for a short time, but it overheats a lot faster. So I'll show you what I mean. It overheats very quickly. And that's another thing too, what we've got on a lot of maps here, especially when you're the attacking team. You have these turrets that are helping to defend the defending side. If you have the opportunity to be able to take turrets out, then I highly recommend it because they can be a nuisance and they can kill you when you least suspect it. And it also helps clear the objective for your teammates to get through and help you actually do damage to the objectives and win the game. Another tip for turrets is if you've got the aiming reticle locked onto them like so, a quick double tap of that proton torpedo will dumbfire it, which means it just fires in a straight line and it should be able to hit the target that you need without having to worry about lock-on, which is extremely useful. So now that I've gone through those general gameplay tips, I'll now show you guys a couple of clips of me in an online game that will hopefully show you guys these strategies being put into action to be actually successful in helping your team win, getting the objective completed, and being able to earn those battle points to be able to use hero ships.
We've disabled their generators, but sensors indicate more coming online. Await further orders. Target down.
Yes, tear them apart.
Overload the unstable field generators. Target their internal support struts.
Heading into engage. Thank you for the help.
You may be able to use the generator's effects to your advantage.
Missile detected.
Scores indicate enemy starfighters have joined the battle.
That's it.
Those field generators are fragile. We must protect them while they come online. Enemy starfighters are firing on their target. Stop them.
Can't believe you survived that. Got him.
Nice shot.
Okay guys, so I hope you took something out of the two clips that I just showed. The last thing I just want to go over really quickly is just some strategies and tips and tricks depending on if you're on the attacking side or on the defending side. So we'll start with the attacking. That's a lot easier to understand. So for the attacking side, your objective is to go through all three phases by destroying a set immobile target. So that might be another destroyer type ship like you would get on Camino as the Separatists, or on Endor as the Rebels. So the only objective you really have is to destroy those ships to advance to the next phase, and then you will destroy some other type of objective, and it just goes through until you win the game. So obviously the best ship in order to combat these objectives is the bomber, as it deals the highest amount of damage and it can fire the longest with its primary weapon. But of course you have to be wary of other ships that are trying to take you out. So the other part with the attacking side is, as you saw in the second clip, there were TIE fighters that had attack red icons above them. Those ships, those TIE fighters, are AI specifically designed to take out the objective. So if you're on the attacking side, you want to as many of those ships as possible to do damage to the objective to help you progress to the next phase. So if you happen to see an enemy trying to take out one of those ships, then your goal is to take out the enemy so that your ship can survive longer and hopefully deal some damage to the objective to help your team progress. The other thing which I actually mentioned earlier with the turrets, if you're on the attacking side and you see a turret close to, especially ones close to the objective, it's very important and useful to be able to take those turrets out. That will actually help the AI ships that I said before, and it will also help your teammates get a bit closer to the objective to deal more damage to it. Now I said before that the bomber is the best ship to choose, but there are also two other ships that you can use. But to be more effective with the fighter and interceptor, it's best to try and chain abilities together. So you have the laser barrage and a proton torpedo. You can fire them both, one after the other, at the objective, as well as your primary weapon, and that ensures that you're dealing out as much damage as possible to that objective. The last thing I want to mention with the attacking side is to just make sure that you're not, when you're firing at an objective, that you're not stationary and travelling in a straight line for too long, because that will make it easier for enemies to take you out from the side or from behind. So make sure you've still got some randomized movement even when you're firing at a single target like I've got here. I'm still moving around. It makes me a little bit harder to hit, and that will make it much easier for you to deal more damage to the objective, to survive a bit longer and get some more score and help your team progress. So now I just want to move on to the defending side. The only goal of the defending side is to just take out as many of the enemy ships as possible, particularly focusing on those that are close to the objective or firing on the objective. So when you're on the defending side, the best ships to choose usually are the interceptor ships, as they are best designed for taking out enemy starfighters as quick as possible. especially those AI ships that are specifically targeted towards the objective. So you want to take out those, and since they travel very slowly and their movements are not that random, they're quite easy to take out, especially with an interceptor. So you definitely want to prioritize taking those ships out. It earns you more score as well, and it's going to help your team to defend the objective that you're trying to defend. And obviously there are some maps where interceptors may not be that good. The best example is the Empire side, the TIE interceptor. I think that is the worst ship that you can possibly choose in the game. So in that instance, the fighter and bomber are both viable options for you to choose to help take out opposing ships. Again, chaining abilities together is extremely useful, and making sure that you are constantly moving without spending too long traveling on the same path. That's really all there is to it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this guide. Sorry if the video's dragged out a little bit long. I just wanted to get as much information to you guys as possible. So feel free to leave a like, leave a comment below, tell me what your thoughts are of it. Did you enjoy this? Were there things you didn't like about it? The things I can improve on potentially? And if there's anything else that you guys would like to see in regards to Starfighters, then I'm all ears. If you want to see some hero ship guides, then maybe I can get some hero ship guides out to you guys. So if that's something you'd like to see, leave a comment below telling me which ship you might want to see, and I'll try and put some footage together and see if I can get that out to you guys. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. See you later.